everyone, it's Emily. I had a few technical difficulties last week, but I'm back and I wanted to make an informal chat video about my experience with Xenoblade Chronicles 3 so far. So I am roughly just over 50 hours in right now, and I want to say I'm in the middle of chapter 5, but I've noticed with the length of these chapters, it's a little bit hard to tell. So I really haven't looked at many reviews of this game or really how the chapter structure works out. So I don't know if I'm halfway or about a third of the way into the game. I did hear that it takes about 120 hours to complete the story and a few side quests. So I've been taking my time doing a lot of side quests and hero quests and kind of putting the basic story on the back burner. And that's mostly just because I've been having a blast just exploring everywhere and doing all the little side quests. But for this video, I'll make sure it's free of any major spoilers, especially concerning the plot. And I just plan to go into some details about what I really like about the game, touch a little bit on the story and the characters and the combat, and also how I would compare this to the other Xenoblade games that are available on the Switch right now. So before I start, I do want to say that if you haven't played any of the Xenoblade Chronicles games, I think jumping into Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is perfectly fine. There's not going to be any major plot spoilers or anything, at least not so far in the 50 hours I've played. But when it comes to skipping directly to Xenoblade Chronicles 3, there's so many quality of life changes and I think improvements on the combat system and other kind of elements throughout the game that going backwards into Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2 might not be the best transition. So I guess my recommendation is to start with 1 and build your way up. I think that would probably provide the best experience, but of course you could always skip directly to Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and decide later on if you want to try the other 2 games, because they are quite different, which I'll get into in a moment. I found with the Xenoblade games that all of them sort of have this very strong theme of war and survivalism. But one of the things I've been really appreciating with Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is that they're exploring these themes at a slightly different angle. With the first Xenoblade game, there's a sense of kind of doom of not being engaged in fighting and trying to go at these immortal beings as a way to survive. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 also has that similar theme of fighting a sort of immortal godlike figure in order to survive, but I feel like they did it on a larger scale with the multiple different titans that different types of people and beings live on. And now with Xenoblade Chronicles 3, you still have these kind of faction wars happening, but they're taking it more on an existential level of what is the purpose of fighting? Is this just a mindless back and forth battle that's never going to end? And what is the larger picture that as soldiers are they missing? It'll be interesting to see how this story continues to unfold, because so far I haven't really found any major twists or anything that you definitely experienced in the first game and maybe to a lesser extent in the second game. Now moving on to characters. I think the third game does a really good job at capturing emotion and making the characters a lot more relatable than, say, the first 2 games. One of the major criticisms about the first Xenoblade Chronicles game is that a lot of the characters felt a little bit too shallow. They didn't really have a whole lot of depth that made them, I think, stand out as video game characters. The second game, however, I think did a better job at playing around with the characters and making them a bit more fun and lively. Also, I think inserting a bit more human characteristics into them. Though I think they did it on a scale that made it a little bit more unbelievable because of how anime-like or outlandish they could be at times. And one of the things I think I've really enjoyed about the third game so far is how they approached the characters. So just talking about the main 6 characters, when you're introduced to them initially, they definitely give off certain personality types to kind of fit a certain stereotype, if you will. But I really liked how throughout the plot and different side quests and things that you kind of see more of their hidden depths. That shows a bit more of their vulnerability and at the end just makes them a lot more relatable and interesting. And as far as side characters go, I really like the hero system that they built into this game. So these are different characters that you can recruit to your team to fight alongside you. And in order to unlock them, you have to go on these what are called hero side quests. And slightly going off tangent here, I really liked how they approached side quests in the third game. I felt like in the first 2 games, there were a lot of boring fetch quests, but the side quests are a lot more interesting, I would say, in the third game. I think that's also why I've been spending my time so much on them, because there's a lot of interesting scenarios and there's not a lot of kind of useless back and forth actions that get really tiresome, especially in a lot of JRPG games. It's not to say there aren't fetch quests in the third game, but I would say they're to a much lesser degree than what we saw in the first 2 games. Now briefly to talk about combat. I think one of the most obvious changes to the third game's combat system is that you can have so many characters on screen at a single time. The first 2 games, they restricted you to basically 3 characters, and in the second game, you could have what are called blades, which are basically another character that will act as your weapon and kind of channel their powers through you. The third game gets rid of sort of the restrictions that the characters could have and what weapons they could wield and things like that. So it feels more like an actual MMORPG that's going on. And so you could customize each character to fit a certain role. And the customization is actually quite detailed. So I haven't had too much time to explore that aspect yet, but I've been having fun with the different kind of bonus attacks they could do. That could definitely impact kind of your approach to how you want to build up your characters and your play style. So if you haven't played this game yet, it can look overly complicated with so much going on the screen and all the different customization types, but I feel like they do a good job at making it simple. So if you want to do the bare minimum, you have that option to do that. But if you wanted to kind of dive a little bit deeper and customize things, you also have that ability as well. The Ouroboros gimmick, I guess this time around, is really interesting, where you could fuse 2 different characters together and sort of be a super being for a short amount of time. And so that's been fun to explore as well. It definitely makes, I think, fighting the more rare or higher leveled monsters a lot easier. Same goes for the chain attacks. So in the first game, I don't remember using chain attacks too much, except maybe on some major bosses. And so that just has a gauge that you have to wait to fill up, and you can kind of do a super round of attacks once it's filled. Same goes for the second game. However, they have different element types that you can kind of do to build up to a massive chain attack by the end of your round. The chain attacks in the third game, I would say, are simpler, but again, there are some hidden depths that if you want to explore that, you definitely can with the different character types and the order that you play them. So it's been really interesting to kind of play around and get a sense of how that system is, though I do find it a little bit less satisfying than the second game's chain attack. The chain attacks are still fun. I just kind of liked building up to the main chain attack. I think that the second game allows you to do a little bit more than the third game. With that said, I would say the combat is definitely easier in the third game. So I don't know if that's because I'm already used to the first 2 games combat style and this is kind of the third iteration of that, but I definitely find myself way overpowered for most of the game right now. So I don't think there's a very good balance of doing the side quests and the main story. I understand that a lot of people don't necessarily want to do side quests and they just want to get along with the story because of just how long this game is. I know my play style is trying to do everything, and so I'm definitely, like, I would say 20 levels above where I should be right now. It's made boss fights in the main storyline a bit easier. So there's definitely, I think, a pacing issue in terms of balancing the side quests and the main storyline. But so far I haven't been too tired of being overpowered for the main story, but I guess if this continues, I might try to save the side quests later. And I guess one more thing about the combat before I move on is there are a ton of rare and unique monsters throughout the map, which I guess doesn't really make them all that rare or unique. I think I liked it better in the previous games where these unique monsters represented a very difficult challenge. In this third game, however, you can find them around basically every corner, so they're not that hard to find, and in a way they're not as satisfying to take down, especially the unique monsters. And because there are just so many, especially I guess in these early stages of the game, you usually become overpowered before you actually find them. So that's something that I found, at least, that they're a lot less satisfying to kind of battle. And for the rare ones that have the blue wings around their level, I don't really like how the game pauses to tell you you defeated them, since they're kind of a dime in the dozen throughout the maps. And lastly, I just wanted to talk about the environments. One of the things that I really love about the Xenoblade games, that I probably talked about multiple times on this channel already, is just how vast the environments are. Compared to the first 2 games, the third game is ginormous. Just the sense of scale of everything just feels so immense. One of the first places that you go to in this game is this mountain, and it's just amazing just how vertical you really go. It makes, I think, navigating the map a little bit tricky, unfortunately. I don't know how they would really improve upon that because there's just so many layers of different planes you could go onto in this very vertical environment. It's hard to describe it, but I just haven't seen the sense of height, I guess, in a video game ever. So it's been really a joy to, I think, explore all the different areas. But one of the things that I find a little bit less fun when doing all the exploration is on the mini map, they do put a little icon about where every single point of interest is, which I think is a little bit of a disappointment, because one of the things I really enjoyed, especially in the second game, was just going over every nook and cranny to find a treasure chest. But in the third game, they have kind of where all those are located. So if you missed one, you'll know it because it's on the map there. I totally understand why they do that because of just how large the environments are, so it's very easy to skip some things. And it also kind of, I think, prompts you to look around a bit more to see how do you kind of climb up this certain area so that you can access this treasure canister or ether spot or something. I find it very satisfying filling out the map. For anyone who's played Ys Memory of Celceta, it's sort of the same thing where you kind of just walk around everywhere and kind of do the map making. But yeah, I think that's sort of my biggest con of the game so far is there's not so many elements of surprise. Exploration, and also a little bit in part the storyline so far. I'm sure there'll be some twist the further I go along, but so far there hasn't been any major twists that I haven't really expected. All right, so I've been rambling for quite a bit, so I'm going to wrap it up and sort of just give my closing thoughts of the first 50 hours of this game. So overall, I've been really enjoying this game. It's been hard to put down, mostly because there's just so many things to do and to explore, and I do like the story that I've seen so far, and I really want to know kind of what happens, and again, if there's going to be some interesting twists along the way. I definitely could see Xenoblade Chronicles 3 being a contender for my favorite out of the trilogy, though it definitely does depend on how the story unfolds, how I will probably rank them all. I think it's really hard to surpass the first one in my eyes just because of the feeling I had when I first played the game. And they did a really good job with enhancing the mystery, and you really didn't know how things would turn out. So I am hoping to finish this game by the end of this month. I do have a lot of work responsibilities and I will be traveling for work, so we'll see if I'll be able to manage that or not. So for anyone else who's been playing this game, let me know how it's been going for you. What are some things that you've been enjoying and some things you may have missed from the previous few games or whatnot. Definitely please try to keep things spoiler free, just for anyone scrolling through the comments. And I've been trying to avoid spoilers, so please don't spoil me either. But yeah, I just wanted to make this video to lay out my initial thoughts, and it'll be interesting to see if anything's changed by the end of this month. So until my next video, bye guys.